Come here. Say hi to the camera. Oh. Okay, we'll just do this video like this. Hang on, guys. Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to the channel. We are back with another book video today, and that's going to be all of the books that I read in October and November because I'm pretty sure I missed my October reading wrap up. So we have a lot of books to get through today, so let's just get into it. Alright, the first book that I read in the month of October, I actually read on my Kindle app on my phone, and that is The Duke and I by Julia Quinn. I'll put a graphic right here or right here because I don't have the book with me right now. I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars, and to be honest, the only reason I read this was because it was already in my Kindle library, and I do love the Bridgerton series on Netflix. That being said, I think it's a pretty faithful adaptation of the book to the TV show, and from what I've heard, because this is the first Bridgerton book that I read, this is the most faithful adaptation of the 3 seasons of Bridgerton that we've gotten so far. It was fine, but honestly, I don't remember much of it comparing what was in the TV show versus what was in the book for me, and I didn't think it was that memorable. There's that one scene where if you watch Bridgerton or have read Bridgerton, you know what I'm talking about, where the act, I'll say, that Daphne does with Simon is questionable, and that was very uncomfortable to read. I didn't know how to go about that, and this is my first introduction to Julia Quinn. It was again, I don't remember much of it, and honestly maybe that's saying more than any type of formal review I can ever say about this book is. It was fine. I do have another Bridgerton book, I think this is Eloise's book, that I picked up from my library book sale. If you guys watched that haul, I'll put it in a card up here, that I do have, but honestly I don't know if I'm going to read it. I think there are other romances that I think would be worth more of my time than picking up another Bridgerton book. I just don't think these are the kind of romance books for me at this time. Alright, the next 2 books that I read I'm going to talk about together because they are part of a series. These are actually the final 2 books in the series, and that is the, what was it called? The Waterfire Saga by Jennifer Donnelly, and that was Dark Tide and Sea Spell by her. Yes. Alright, and I gave both of these books 3 stars, and this entire series in general ended up being 3 stars for me. Dark Tide is picking up where the last one left off, which I totally forgot the title of the second book, picks up where we left off with Seraphina building her allies and her forces to defeat her uncle's takeover of her city to win back her crown. We get to know more about Astrid, who the first 2 books really didn't focus on at all, and her connection with the other 5 mermaids. I think there was 5. Yes, 5, and why she was chosen and her backstory. My problem with the series as a whole, not just the 3rd book, whose name was what was the 3rd book's name? Dark Tide, is that I don't know why Jennifer Donnelly decided to do this, because it really just came out of left field. She decided to write romance plots in for almost all of the other mermaids besides Seraphina, who was our main character, and the pacing for those romances was so off. It seemed like she needed to put romantic plots in there, so she just stuck them in there and said go for it. And for a series that already has so much going on, where I don't think the point of views of the mermaids, the 6 of them, was spread out evenly and paced well, this was just another thing to add on that affected the pacing of these books. like we got a new, let's see, the first book, the focus was really on Seraphina and sometimes Neela, and a little touch of Ling, but the main focus was of course Seraphina. She is our main character, and we see her romance, her like romantic subplot with her fiance Madi, and that was written really well. I was rooting for them, and hoping that they can work it out and make it through this entire war that they are going through. And I was very invested in them. But by the time we got to the third book and we were focusing on the other mermaids that we really didn't know that much about, to throw in more romantic subplots with other characters, romantic interests that we don't know anything about, and that's some more backstory, it wasn't necessary. This time could have been spent developing the other characters' backstories more. And like the two other characters that got romantic love interests were Astrid and Becca, I want to say, and it wasn't needed. And by the time Becca had said I love you to her love interest, I was like, do you really? Because it just wasn't developed well, and there wasn't any time spent developing that romantic relationship other than just putting them like in a situation together and being like, here, this is good enough, you're gonna fall in love now. And that's just not how it works. If this was a middle grade series, I think I would have been more okay with that kind of romance developing, but this wasn't middle grade, this was actually young adult, and I think more time and attention needed to be put into those romantic subplots if that's something that Jennifer Donnelly wanted to focus on in these books. But that should not have been a focus. I don't think it was needed to add tension whatsoever to the conflict in this. And I think overall, I just had problems with the pacing of these books and how it was divvied up between the characters in these books. Because after book 2, you never really hear, I never heard about Neela again, and which was off-putting because we did get chapters from her point of view. So it felt like there was a missing piece there. And then like half-baked backstories for the rest of them. So it was a good fantasy series if you're just starting to get into fantasy, but there's definitely better out there with better developed subplots. Next up, I wasn't anticipating getting into another series this year. It's been the year of series for me, but I did start reading ACOTAR, and the way that I got through these books so fast was like astonishing to me because they're thick books. But the first one I read, ACOTAR, I picked this up because I promised my best friend, who actually gifted this to me, that I would read it this year. This is her favorite series, so I had been texting her throughout reading this book. And it was really nice to like share this reading experience with her, because I would text her and be like, oh my god, this just happened. She'd be like, I know, just wait. And she would be like, oh, just you wait, girl, in terms of like some characters. And I was like, I think I got to this part, but I'm not sure. And I had heard so much online about this series, and like character names, that like once I read them I was like, oh, this is who they were talking about. But like it was nice to finally understand all the references. But if you don't know what ACOTAR is about, first of all, congratulations, because this book is everywhere. This is about a young girl who is named Feyre. She is just trying to take care of her family when one day she hunts the wrong wolf and gets drawn into this fairy world and the conflict going on there. I understand how people, after reading the rest of the series, say the first book isn't good, but not knowing that at the time what goes on with the rest of the series, I liked the pacing of this book. Yes, sometimes it felt slow in comparison to everything else, but if this is your first step into fantasy or high fantasy right? Because I didn't believe I was a fantasy reader either, even though I had been reading Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows and was it King of Scars. Like, that was my only venture into fantasy, really. I feel like this is a good book to be your like foray into fantasy. The pacing's nice. I didn't find a problem with that. Although I don't want to curse, things really pick up in the end of the book, like the last third of it, I want to say. And that's a common thing that I see happening with Sarah J. Maas's books, now that I've read 1 through 4 of them, where the pacing, the first like 2/3 of the book, it's slow, and then you hit like the last third and everything just happens at once. But like, I didn't understand the criticism people had with the pacing of this. I thought it was nice. I really don't want to say anything else, but like, if you're thinking about going into fantasy or romantasy, although I don't believe this is romantasy, really, I do think it's just fantasy with romance in it. I think you would enjoy this. And I think I ended up giving this 5 stars. I think for most of this series, I've given it 5 stars. Not because there aren't parts of the book that I was critical of, just for the enjoyment alone. I enjoyed reading this so much I couldn't put it down, and that is said for the entire series as a whole. I'm sure if I reread it again, there would definitely be things I had a problem with, but overall enjoyment, 5 out of 5 stars. And something like this, I feel I read more for enjoyment than to be critical of it. But that's not to say that I didn't go into this thinking I wouldn't enjoy it as much as I did, because it was so hyped up. I had heard so many varying things online about ACOTAR, but I think it is appropriately hyped up. Like, I get why people gush about it so much. And the next book in the ACOTAR series is A Court of Mist and Fury. Here we see Feyre coming to terms with all that had happened in the first book and adjusting to her life now living permanently in the Fey realm and dealing with the consequences of her actions in the end of A Court of Thorns and Roses. I don't really want to delve further into this without spoiling it for you guys. I will say I understand why this is people's favorite book in the series. The romance plot in here is so good. Like, the pacing was great for the romance in this. I was like kicking my feet the entire time and just waiting and waiting and waiting for the characters to finally get together and acknowledge how they were feeling together about each other, because the banter between them had been so good. And I really liked that they were always truthful with each other and let each other make their own decisions. Because I don't want to spoil anything else, but once we finally got to not chapter 55, that's something else, but I'll say when we finally got to the scene where there was only one bed, I was like, heck yeah, man, finally. You really see more of the magic system in this book and get a better understanding of the different levels to the magic system, and high fairies versus like the lower fairies. And you meet the found family in this one that I absolutely love so much. The found family aspect in this is so good, and the sense of community and finding your roots was like so good, so good. The next one in the ACOTAR series is A Court of, was it Wings and Ruin? Oh, guys. Ooh, this had me bawling like a baby. I'll insert a clip here. I sent that to my friend very late at night where she was already sleeping, but I wanted to stay up to finish this book, and I FaceTimed her the next day. I was like, why didn't you answer me in the morning when you woke up? And she was like, well, I knew we were talking, but I did love watching that video of you sobbing. And I was like, wow, thanks. because a lot of things that had been foreshadowed in the previous books came to fruition. Here you really see Feyre dealing with the more political aspects of this world and not just the magic system, and they're dealing with turmoil between each of the fairy realms and someone trying to break the barrier between the fairy world and the human world, and how to deal with that person. I guess I'm trying to be vague as to not, again, not to spoil anything, because I really went into this series knowing next to nothing, which I think is a feat. I really just knew for the character names and that was it. I didn't know about plot or anything, and I think that's the best way to go about reading the series if you do decide to pick it up, because there's so many twists and turns and layers to what is happening in the story, where like you think one thing's happening but then it turns out to be something else. I will say that the end battle in this, some aspects of it were really disappointing for me, like the thing that happened with the father. I just thought that came out of nowhere, and it didn't hit the emotional note that I think Sarah J. Maas was hoping for it to hit, because I think the father was a deadbeat, we'll say, and making his last stand now when he hadn't done anything in the previous books. It just kind of felt like hollow to me. Like, you had all this time to show your daughters how much you cared, but for so many years you just sat on your butt feeling sorry for yourself and depending on your one daughter to take care of the entire family, when that is your responsibility as the father. I have not read Silver Flames yet. I'm waiting until I have a couple of days off to just dedicate my entire time to reading that. But oh my gosh, I don't know how I emotionally recovered from this, honestly. And the final ACOTAR book that I read was A Court of Frost and Starlight. This is really a novella more than anything. It's like 200 pages, a little more. And people online reference this as like the holiday special that TV shows do. And it's, yeah, I could see why they do that. Because after the huge conflict in A Court of Wings and Ruin, this is really just like cozy slice of life for the characters that we have gotten to know and fallen in love with in the previous books. There's really no major conflict in here, which is nice. It's more about reestablishing what a normal day-to-day life is now that the war is over. And tonally it is so different from the rest of the series, where to the point where I almost felt like I was reading a fan fiction, because there was like nothing huge and anxiety inducing going on here. Like I said, it really is slice of life, and it kind of reminded me of like 2012 Avengers fanfics, where everyone was writing about like how the Avengers were living in the tower together and what shenanigans would go on there. That's the vibe that I got from this. I still so enjoyed this, but it definitely did not live up to the first 3 books, in my opinion. I think I only gave it like 4 stars instead of 5. Everything else was 5 stars or something like that. The last thing I will say about ACOTAR in general, people say it's like a super spicy book, but honestly, the spice, the way people were hyping up the spice in these, I was expecting a lot more. Like, there's still spice in there, but I've read spicier, and for people to be like, this is the spiciest thing I've ever read, I was like, really? Really? Have you picked up an Elle Kennedy book? But yeah, that was ACOTAR. Loved it. I enjoyed reading these so much. So fast paced that you can get through them like they're nothing, even though they are. Look how fat these books are. Like, this is 200 pages. This was like 700. But for it being 700 pages, I think I finished it in like 2 or 3 days, which that's amazing for me. And part of the reason why I don't pick up a lot of fantasy, or hadn't in the past, is because the sheer size of them was really intimidating to me. Alright, but speaking of Elle Kennedy, the next book that I read was The Graham Effect by Elle Kennedy. And this book I actually started using tabs for, which I'd never done before, but I've been thinking about it, and it's definitely something that I will keep doing for my future reads. But this book, we are back at Briar University, but this time our main character is Gigi Graham. So if you remember from the Legacy, in that book we find out that Hannah is pregnant with twins, and this is Gigi, Garrett and Hannah's daughter, which is so crazy. I actually filmed an entire reading vlog. My cat's at the door. Hang on. Buddy. Hi. Okay, we're just gonna try and film this with him behind me. But as I was saying, I actually filmed an entire reading vlog of me reading this book, just because I know myself, and at this point any Elle Kennedy book for me is most likely going to be 4 or 5 stars. So I'll put that in a card up here for you guys to watch if you would like. But we are following Gigi as our main character in this. She is at her junior year at Briar U, and our love interest in this, his name is Ryder. That's actually his last name, but he doesn't like using his first name. And this is a hate to love book. I wouldn't say it's enemies to lovers because I don't think they ever truly hate each other, but it's definitely hate to love. And Luke is actually a co-captain of Briar's hockey team. Hi. And although these two did not get off on the right foot with each other, they both end up needing each other to help them advance in their careers. Gigi would like to make the US women's hockey team in time for the Olympics. So she enlists Ryder's help to help her figure out some of her weaknesses in hockey. And then Ryder needs Gigi because he would love to land a coaching spot at Garrett's summer hockey camp, and he needs Gigi to kind of talk him up to her father. So in a way I saw like a lot of parallels to Garrett and Hannah's relationship and how that started, because it all started with a deal for them as well. And as you can see, I tabbed a lot of things in this. The red and pink, because I ran out of red eventually. The red and pink are all cute moments of them together, kind of realizing their feelings for each other, or like cute things that they do for each other, not just like these spicy scenes, although there are those. I just don't tab them. And then the blue in this, I marked whenever I saw something that reminded me of like Garrett and Hannah, or just referencing parallels I saw to the deal, because I saw a lot of parallels not only with Gigi's story and Garrett's, but also Luke's story as well as Garrett's. There are a lot of references back to the off-campus series and those characters, as well as Briar U series and some of those characters. We find out pretty quickly that Garrett has retired, but he has a, I think, commentary show with some sports network that he does with Jake Connolly, who is the male main character from The Risk, the second book in the Briar U series. And we see more of the found family that was developed in off-campus, where Gigi, she talks about her Uncle Dean and Uncle Logan, and we hear about their kids at some points, which is really wholesome. Of course, I loved hearing about like updates from all the old characters that I fell in love with. I will say it was really weird for me to read about Garrett and Hannah being parents and adults, and they're like middle, I don't want to say middle age, that's weird, but like I think Garrett was like late 40s or early 50s at least. I will say though, as much as I loved reading about Gigi's relationship with Garrett in this, I really wanted to see more of her relationship with Hannah as well. Hannah wasn't in this nearly as much as Garrett was, and I have a feeling that's because Gigi and her father really bonded over hockey, and obviously this is a hockey romance. But I feel like Hannah's character was done a disservice in this, because any moments that we saw Hannah, I feel like she could have been replaced with any other mother figure, and it wouldn't have changed the dynamics that we read about between Gigi and Hannah. They were very just like the typical mom and daughter, where I didn't really see this is the Hannah that I read about and loved in the deal, which is unfortunate. And the one thing that I wish was gone more in depth into in this book, even though it is a pretty fat book for Elle Kennedy, I think this is one of the longer ones she's written that I've read so far, is that I wish there was a scene or a chapter or two where Ryder and Garrett sat down and talked just one-on-one with each other about their respective backgrounds and their relationships with their fathers, because there's a lot of similarities in that way. And because Ryder is such an important person to Gigi, and he didn't give the best first impression with Garrett as well, I think if they had talked about that, that would have really improved their relationship with each other. But overall, I gave this 4 stars. I love being back in this world, and I think I'm really gonna love this new generation of Briar kids, I guess, if we're gonna call it that. There was a lot of setup in this book for the next 2 in the series, Dixon Rule, which I believe the female main character is going to be Gigi's best friend, and then Charlie Method, which isn't out yet. I think that's out in February. There was some setup for that as well, so I can't wait for those. I will read basically anything Elle Kennedy writes. I definitely want to make it a goal for myself in the new year to start reading more of her backlist of books, because I know she has some other series, and I can't get enough. And the last book that I read in October and November was the very hyped up book on booktok, which is Icebreaker, another hockey romance. This is another hate to love romance between our 2 main characters, Anastasia and Nate. Anastasia is a junior and she is a pairs figure skater, and her goal is to make it onto Team USA with her partner in order to get to the Olympics. Nate is a senior and he is currently captain of the hockey team. So the hate to love starts because instead of splitting the ice time between the figure skaters and hockey players between the 2 rinks on campus, an incident happens where they now have to share one, and Nate doesn't really understand why Anastasia is so upset with this, and doesn't really try and see her perspective on things, and that's where the hate part comes in. Now, I know people call this a hockey romance, but where was the hockey in this hockey romance? I don't know if I said this, but I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. But just because your male love interest is a hockey player does not mean that this is a hockey romance, especially when the focus on hockey is minimal to none. Like, I know that Nate was captain of the team, and they said that they won their championships, but that's it. I couldn't even tell you what position Nate plays in hockey. I don't even know the team's record. It says he goes away for away games sometimes, but that is it. And maybe it's because I had read Icebreaker as soon as, like, I started right after I finished The Graham Effect, where hockey was a mainstay in it. Like, we saw their points of view on the ice and like where they need to improve on their skills, but there was none of that whatsoever in Icebreaker, and it just was more of a typical romance, a college set romance, than like a sports romance, in my opinion, especially a hockey romance. I thought hockey was going to be talked about way more than it was in this book. Figure skating, however, that you definitely learn more about figure skating and pair skating than we ever did with hockey. Like, the balance between those two sports was not there at all. I also thought that this book was way longer than it needed to be. I think part of the reason why it's so hyped up on TikTok is because of the amount of spice in this, and it was a spicy book. And I think those scenes could have been like cut in half and still would have had the same effect. And with the length of the book that it is, I think some plot points that were established in the book could have been resolved better by the end, such as Nate's relationship with his father. It explained why his father was the way that he is, but I don't think there was any resolution to the relationship that those two had. There was no improvement with them, no like heart to heart, and with like establishing kind of a tense relationship between the two, I think that could have been sorted out better. Not to say that like it needed to be 100% fixed by the end of the book, but I think they could have come to a better understanding of each other, because there was like no apologies made or anything like this. It was more along the lines of, this is who my father is and he's never going to change. That being said, I do like the main group of friends that are established in this book. I thought Anna's relationship with Nate's teammates was really sweet, and I liked that they all had like individual friendships and like different friendship dynamics between them. I loved reading those parts of the books, especially when they're all just joking around with each other. I will be picking up the next book in the series because I definitely see why it's hyped up on TikTok, but there's definitely been better. It was a cute romance, but like, if this is your start to hockey romance, honey, there's so much better. And this is just the first author that I read. So I feel like I'm kind of spoiled in that way. But like I said with ACOTAR, I think it's a good introduction to the genre as a whole, and I think that's why it's so hyped up on TikTok. But anyways, guys, that is it for this video. We only have 1 month left in 2024, which is actually insane to me. I will be filming a video about the books that I want to read before the end of the year, so stay tuned for that. If you like this video, please hit the subscribe button down below. If you want to see more of my face, you can find all of my other social media linked down below in the description box. Other than that, I hope you have a wonderful morning, noon, night, or day, wherever you are in the world, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!